This place isn't for your kind. Get him out. The words cracked across the marble lobby like a whip. They weren't whispered. They weren't disguised as policy. They were meant to sting, and they did. The blonde woman behind the front desk stood tall, lips curved into a satisfied smirk. Her voice cut through chandeliers, polished floors, and velvet chairs, shattering the illusion of elegance. Two uniformed officers stepped forward, their presence sudden and heavy. They gripped Marcus Wright by the arms, guiding him toward the exit as if escorting a criminal. Their boots struck the marble with authority, each step echoing like judgment. Marcus didn't resist. He didn't even blink. His charcoal gray overcoat draped neatly over a simple black turtleneck, his shoes polished but understated. He carried no entourage, no flashy symbols of wealth, only composure, only silence. But silence in this room felt louder than rage. A couple near the leather sofas froze mid-conversation. A bellhop balanced a silver tray that trembled in his hands. A guest near the elevators whispered, "Did she just say what I think she said?" The blonde clerk leaned closer over the mahogany desk, eyes sharp, voice dripping with disdain. Luxury hotels have standards. He doesn't belong here. The officers tightened their grip. One of them muttered, "You've got 20 minutes to clear out." His tone wasn't official. It was humiliating, a countdown staged for the crowd. Marcus inhaled, steady and controlled. His chest rose, then settled, as if anchoring himself to the marble floor. He had heard these words before. At 25, dressed in his Sunday best, he had been told by a clerk in Charlotte that this lounge is for guests only. At 32, a manager in Los Angeles had looked at his ID twice and still refused him entry to the suite he owned. Now, at 46, history repeated itself under the glow of a $1,000 chandelier. Different city, same prejudice, same arrogance. But this time was different. Because this wasn't just any hotel lobby, this was his. The smirk on the clerk's face widened as she gestured toward the revolving doors. "That's right," she said loudly, making sure the crowd heard. "Get him out." Phones lifted discreetly. A red recording light blinked. Guests exchanged glances, the air buzzing, the tension thickening. It was no longer a private humiliation. It was a spectacle. And Marcus let it happen. He allowed every eye to watch, every lens to capture. Not because he was powerless, but because patience was power. He tilted his head slightly, his voice calm, low, precise. "Doors don't close on me, they open. You'll learn that soon." For a split second, the lobby shifted. The chandelier still sparkled. The officers still held his arms, but authority wavered. The smirk faltered, and the room, though they didn't know it yet, had already begun to belong to him. Just 20 minutes earlier, the lobby had been calm. Strings of a piano floated from hidden speakers. The marble floor gleamed, the kind of surface meant to intimidate more than welcome. Marcus Wright stepped through the revolving doors alone. No assistant, no luggage cart, no flash of designer logos. Just a charcoal overcoat, a black turtleneck, and the kind of presence that carried its own weight. He moved with ease, not rushing, not posturing. To most eyes, he looked like any man checking into a hotel he couldn't quite afford. And that was intentional. Marcus had built his empire by listening more than speaking, by watching more than announcing. Today was no different. He wanted to see his hotel, not through the lens of ownership, but through the eyes of a guest. And he wanted to see how his staff treated people who didn't fit their image of wealth. He approached the front desk with a quiet nod. "Reservation for Wright, penthouse suite." His tone was calm, unhurried. The clerk, a blonde woman with a practiced smile, barely glanced at the computer. Her eyes did the real scanning, from his plain shoes to the absence of any designer watch. She held her smile, but her voice thinned. "Are you sure you booked the right property?" Marcus slid a slim leather wallet across the counter. Inside, an ID, a platinum card, a reservation confirmation. The items landed softly on the mahogany surface, but the gesture carried weight. Proof, clear and simple. The clerk picked up the card with 2 fingers, holding it as though it might stain her skin. Her smirk deepened. She tapped a few keys, not really searching. Then she looked back up, eyes cold. "Strange. I don't see you in the system. Perhaps you've made a mistake." Marcus didn't answer right away. His silence stretched, steady, unbothered, but silence unsettled her. She pressed a button beneath the counter. A red light blinked faintly. Somewhere in the back office, Security was already on alert. Behind her, two other staffers exchanged glances. One, a young concierge with dark hair pulled tight, frowned at her screen. The name Wright appeared clear in the system, highlighted with VIP status. She knew it. She had seen it just that morning, but she said nothing. Not yet. Marcus placed his hands lightly on the counter. "Run my name again." The clerk didn't. Instead, she leaned closer, her voice sharper this time. "Luxury suites are for certain clients, people who fit our standards. You understand?" The words weren't policy. They were prejudice wrapped in velvet. Marcus's eyes didn't move. His tone stayed low. Standards? Or assumptions? She blinked. For a moment, just a flicker, the smirk slipped. Then it returned, colder than before. "I'll call the manager." And with that, the stage was set. The lobby that had been calm now carried a tension beneath its polished surface. Guests waiting in line shifted uncomfortably. A traveler sitting with his laptop near the lounge glanced up, curiosity sharpening into concern. Marcus adjusted his coat, not to impress, but to anchor. This wasn't his first test, it wouldn't be his last. But in this very lobby, beneath this chandelier, the cycle was about to break. The click of polished heels announced her before her words did. Problem here? Gregory Vance, the hotel manager, strode forward in a navy suit, too crisp to be approachable. His smile was thin, his tone thicker with suspicion. He didn't wait for an answer. He scanned Marcus from head to toe, pausing deliberately on the plain turtleneck and lack of luggage. The blonde clerk leaned in, voice dripping with certainty. "He claims to have a penthouse reservation, but his name isn't in the system." Gregory crossed his arms. "I see." He didn't look at the screen. He looked at Marcus like a man already guilty. "This is a luxury property, sir, not a walk-in center. If you're looking for something affordable, there are plenty of options downtown." A few guests shifted uncomfortably in line. One raised an eyebrow. Another whispered, "That didn't sound right." Marcus remained still. His hand rested lightly on the counter. His breathing never changed. "Run my name again," he said, measured. Gregory shook his head. "We're not wasting resources verifying false claims. If you can't provide appropriate documentation, you'll need to leave." "I gave it to her," Marcus replied. "ID. Card. Confirmation." The blonde clerk lifted the black card between two fingers, showing it like evidence of fraud. "These can be faked. Happens all the time." She slipped it back onto the desk with a dismissive tap. Gregory's voice hardened. "Security." From the side entrance, two guards emerged in matching suits. They didn't rush, but their pace was deliberate, their presence heavy. The crowd noticed. A man near the lounge muttered, "He gave his ID. What's the issue?" His companion hushed him. Marcus adjusted his stance, shoulders steady. He'd been here before, not this hotel, not this city, but this exact scene. The same script, the same stage, different faces. The young concierge, still silent, flicked her eyes between the screen and Gregory. She could see the reservation clear as day, right, penthouse, executive level, but her lips stayed sealed. Fear outweighed truth. Gregory raised his voice now, loud enough for the entire lobby. "You're holding up paying guests. You need to step aside immediately." "Dodo." The clerk folded her arms, triumphant. "This property has standards. People like him." She stopped just short of finishing the sentence, but the implication was louder than any word. Marcus's gaze didn't break. He spoke with precision. "Your standards are showing, and they're not written in any policy." A ripple moved through the lobby, a quiet intake of breath from strangers who knew what they had just witnessed. The guards stopped a few feet away, waiting for Gregory's signal. The clerk leaned over the counter, almost enjoying the spectacle, and above it all, the chandelier sparkled, cold, indifferent, a silent witness to arrogance masquerading as authority. The lobby waited for a flare of anger, for raised voices, for the familiar script of protest and defense. But it didn't come. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't plead. He simply stood there, a stillness anchored into marble. The guards closed in, but his composure filled more space than their posture ever could. He reached across the counter with deliberate care and picked up his ID and card. He slipped them back into his leather wallet, not rushed, not shaken. Every movement told the same story. "I am not here to beg. I am here to stand." The blonde clerk tilted her head, waiting for him to stumble. to explain himself, to justify. When he didn't, her smirk faltered, then sharpened. "Your silence isn't helping," she said flatly. Marcus lifted his eyes to hers, calm, steady. "Silence doesn't need to help. It already speaks." The words landed heavier than a shout. Even the guards hesitated, glancing briefly at one another. Gregory, the manager, scoffed. "Cute line. Won't change the fact that you don't belong here." Marcus said nothing. His stillness stretched long enough for the room itself to notice. A woman with a suitcase paused mid-step. A man scrolling his phone near the lounge looked up, then kept watching. Something was happening, though no one yet knew what. Inside Marcus's mind, memories pressed against the present. 20 years ago, standing in line at a boutique hotel, a clerk had told him, "Sir, this is for premium guests only." He had walked out into the cold night with a reservation in his pocket and shame in his chest. He had turned that shame into fuel, brick by brick, until he owned more than the clerk could imagine. Now, that same dismissal replayed in different costumes, different accents, but the same venom. The difference was, Marcus had long since traded shame for patience. The guards took one cautious step closer. One cleared his throat. "Sir, we don't want to escalate this." Marcus's voice was quiet but cut like steel. "Then don't." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged. Guests leaned forward subtly, drawn into a storm that had yet to break. The young concierge behind the counter shifted in her seat, eyes flicking again to the screen where Right, penthouse suite, still glowed. She pressed her lips together. Fear chained her, but truth glared from the monitor. Gregory noticed her hesitation and snapped, "Don't get involved." His tone was sharp, revealing a crack in his own confidence. Marcus adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, calm as ever. He wasn't trying to win the room. He was letting the room reveal itself. Every second of silence was a mirror, and it was showing everyone exactly who they were. The first red light blinked from the corner of the lobby. A phone raised just high enough to catch the scene. Its owner, a young man in a navy hoodie, whispered to his companion, "This doesn't look right." His friend nodded, angling the phone discreetly. "Keep filming. People need to see this." Across the marble floor, a woman in her 60s clutched her handbag tighter, eyes narrowed. She wasn't filming, but her expression said enough, shock laced with disbelief. The young concierge behind the desk sat frozen. The screen in front of her glowed, "Right, penthouse suite, VIP." Confirmed. The evidence was right there. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat louder than the lobby chatter. She wanted to speak, but Gregory's glare from earlier still burned like a warning. The blonde clerk leaned back in her chair, unbothered. "Go ahead," she said loudly enough for the crowd. "Film it. He doesn't belong here, and we're enforcing policy." Her voice carried, dressed in authority but reeking of bias. Marcus remained unmoved. His silence wasn't weakness, it was weight, and the room felt it. The man with the phone lowered it briefly. "Should I post this?" he asked his friend. From the lounge, another guest, a businesswoman with sharp eyes, spoke for the first time. "If you do, don't edit. Don't spin it. Let the truth stand." Her words drew glances. More phones lifted, some discreet, some bold. Within minutes, half a dozen tiny red lights dotted the lobby, capturing the moment from every angle. Gregory noticed. His jaw tightened. "Everyone needs to mind their own business," he barked. But the more he demanded silence, the louder the unspoken judgment grew. The young concierge shifted again. Finally, her voice broke the tension, soft but audible. "His name is in the system." The clerk snapped her head around. "What did you say?" Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't retreat. "Right, penthouse suite. It's confirmed." A ripple of whispers swept through the guests. The man in the hoodie whispered, "I knew it," as his phone caught her words. Gregory's face hardened, but his tone was ice. "One more word out of you, and you're done here." The concierge lowered her gaze, but the truth was already loose. It hung in the air, undeniable, replaying in digital echoes across recording phones. Marcus still hadn't raised his voice, still hadn't moved more than an inch. But in the silence that followed, his presence swelled larger than any order barked across the room. The chandelier glittered above, but the real light now came from the screens in trembling hands, screens that would carry this moment far beyond the marble lobby. Gregory stepped closer, his polished shoes striking the marble with authority he didn't fully own. His voice cut through the whispers, sharp and final. Enough. This man is not a guest. He is wasting our time and harassing paying customers. The blonde clerk crossed her arms, chin tilted high. Told you, this is what they do. Walk in, flash a card, claim a suite. She smirked at the phones, now recording her every word. You can film it all you want. Fraud is still fraud. Gasps rippled through the lobby. A woman in line muttered, "She just called him a fraud." Another guest whispered back, but the concierge confirmed his name. Haustat. Gregory ignored them, his gaze locked on Marcus, cold, dismissive. You've embarrassed yourself enough. You need to leave now before we escalate further. Marcus didn't flinch, his breathing steady, his eyes fixed on the chandelier above as though its glitter held more dignity than the words thrown at him. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way Marcus stood, calm in the storm. Maybe it was the unease creeping through the crowd. The clerk leaned forward again, voice laced with venom. You people think a black card and a smile get you anywhere. Not here. Not today. The words landed like a stone hurled into water, the ripples immediate, unavoidable. Guests shifted, some pulling their children closer, some raising phones higher. The young concierge's jaw tightened. Her eyes flicked toward Marcus, then back to Gregory. Fear still gripped her, but her silence grew heavier by the second. Marcus lowered his gaze slowly, finally meeting Gregory's eyes. He spoke quietly, measured, almost surgical. You're destroying your reputation with every word. Gregory scoffed, louder this time, trying to reclaim ground. My reputation? I've run this property for 15 years. I know who belongs here, and it's not you. The clerk laughed, a short, cruel sound. Exactly. He doesn't fit. Look at him. No luggage, no brand names, just a story. How? A man near the lounge spoke up now, his voice firm. Stories don't book penthouse suites. Reservations do, and you've got one in your system. The room fell silent for a beat. Gregory's glare shot toward the man, but the momentum was shifting. Guests were no longer passive. They were witnesses with opinions, voices, and cameras. Still, Gregory pressed on, doubling down. Security, prepare to escort him out, now. The guards hesitated, not out of defiance, but out of caution. The tide of the room was no longer with the manager. And Marcus? He didn't move. He stood as if rooted in stone, his silence echoing louder than Gregory's command. The chandelier glittered above, but the shine of power in the lobby was dimming, and not from Marcus's side. The clerk's smirk sharpened into something uglier. She reached across the counter, snatched Marcus's card from where he had laid it moments ago, and held it high for the lobby to see. Fake, she declared, loud enough for the chandelier to catch the word and bounce it back across marble walls. Looks real, but it's nothing. A cheap trick. Gasps erupted. A man near the elevators muttered, "She can't do that." A woman clutched her daughter's hand, whispering, "This feels wrong." Gregory didn't hesitate. He took the card from her fingers and slid it into a small drawer behind the desk, slamming it shut like a verdict. "Company property now," he announced. "Until verified, you have no right to it." Phones lifted higher. The red lights multiplied. Whispers thickened like smoke. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "You just stole from me." Gregory smirked. "I prevented fraud. There's a difference." He turned to the guards. "Call the police." The younger guard hesitated. "Sir, maybe we should—" "Now," Gregory barked, his voice cracking with authority he didn't truly own. The blonde clerk leaned on the counter, savoring the spectacle. "They'll handle him quick. People like that don't last long once real law shows up." Her words sliced through the crowd, leaving a trail of outrage and disbelief. Phones shifted from discreet to bold. Guests no longer hid their recordings. A man near the lounge spoke into his camera. "We're at the Horizon Grand. They just called the cops on a paying guest. This is insane." "Damn it." The young concierge finally rose from her chair, her voice trembling but audible. "His reservation is valid. Penthouse. Under right. I saw it this morning." Gregory spun toward her, fury etched across his face. "Sit down. You're done here." But the words were already out. They hung heavy in the air, captured by every blinking lens. At the front doors, the faint wail of sirens pierced the night, growing louder, closer. Guests exchanged uneasy looks. Some shifted toward the exit. Others stayed rooted, unwilling to look away. The blonde clerk whispered to Gregory, but her voice carried just far enough. Imagine the headline. Fake card holder arrested in luxury hotel lobby. Marcus exhaled slowly, steady as ever. His eyes swept the room, meeting faces, cameras, witnesses. Then he spoke, quiet but sharp. You've called the police on your own employer. A hush swept the lobby. Even the guards froze, uncertain if they had heard correctly. Marcus didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. The weight of his words settled into the marble, into the chandelier's glow, into every trembling hand holding a phone. The sirens grew louder. Justice, or humiliation, was minutes away, and no one in that lobby understood yet which side of the line they were standing on. The sirens outside wailed closer, echoing off the glass facade of the hotel. Inside, the tension coiled so tightly it felt like the lobby itself might shatter. Marcus slid one hand into his coat pocket with deliberate calm. No rush, no panic. He drew out a sleek black phone, tapped once, and lifted it to his ear. His voice was steady, measured, almost surgical. Activate protocol. On the other end, a woman's voice answered instantly. Crisp. Professional. Prepared. Understood. Recording initiated. Internal system lock primed. Do you want escalation authority activated? Marcus's eyes scanned the lobby, lingering on Gregory, the clerk, then the trembling concierge. Yes. Timestamp everything. Escalation in progress. The young man in the hoodie whispered to his friend. Did he just say protocol? His friend nodded, still filming. Something's about to happen. Gregory scoffed, trying to mask the crack in his confidence. Oh, please. Calling a friend won't change anything. The police are on their way. One Dow. Marcus lowered the phone slightly, his gaze never leaving Gregory. His tone sharpened without raising volume. They'll arrive to a crime scene, and you just authored it. The words landed like a gavel strike. The guards shifted uneasily. The blonde clerk's smirk faltered for the first time, flickering into something closer to doubt. The assistant's voice came through the speaker, amplified just enough to be overheard by those closest. Protocol locked. All hotel activity is under audit. Managerial actions are being logged. Do you want me to notify the board? A murmur rolled through the guests. Notify the board? A woman whispered. Who is this guy? Marcus's voice was calm, almost cold. Not yet. Stand by. The concierge, still pale but braver now, stepped forward a fraction. Her voice shook, but her words didn't. He's not lying. I saw his name. It's real. Phones caught it all, every syllable, every frame. Gregory snapped, louder than before, but the cracks in his tone betrayed him. Enough of this circus! Security, remove him now! The guards didn't move immediately. Their hesitation was visible, heavy, and dangerous for Gregory. Authority was slipping through his fingers, not because Marcus had shouted, but because he hadn't. Marcus raised the phone again. Escalate one level. Yes, sir, came the reply. Legal documentation underway. Staff access under review. So, the blonde clerk's eyes widened. Staff access? She whispered, almost to herself. And for the first time that night, fear, not arrogance, flickered across her face. Marcus slid the phone back into his pocket, his presence radiating more command than any badge in the room. He looked around the lobby, at the guests, the cameras, the staff, and spoke evenly. You've mistaken silence for surrender. That was your last mistake. The room exhaled collectively, as though recognizing a storm was no longer approaching. It was here. The wail of sirens outside softened as a patrol car pulled to a stop at the curb. Through the glass doors, flashing lights painted streaks of red and blue across the marble floor. The lobby held its breath, caught between spectacle and collapse. Marcus stood unmoved. His silence was no longer absence. It was presence, weight pressing down on every smirk, every whisper, every recording phone. Gregory straightened his tie, desperate to reclaim authority. Perfect timing. Officers will settle this quickly. You'll regret ever walking in here. Marcus exhaled slowly, then spoke with precision. No, Gregory, you will. He slipped his phone from his pocket again, tapped once. A voice crackled through, calm and clipped. Audit in progress, mister. Right, would you like me to confirm ownership records? Gasps rippled. Guests leaned closer. Someone whispered into their camera. Wait, ownership? Gregory laughed, brittle and forced. Ownership? You expect us to believe that? He's just... Marcus cut him off, his words sharp enough to slice the air. I don't need you to believe. I need you to listen. My name is Marcus Wright. I am the founder and majority shareholder of the Horizon Group. And this hotel, he gestured around the glittering lobby, the chandelier, the velvet chairs, the trembling staff, belongs to me. Silence slammed into the room. Even the sirens outside seemed muted in comparison. The young concierge let out a breath she'd been holding since he walked in. Her voice trembled, but it carried. I saw it in the system. Right. Owner-level clearance. It's true. The blonde clerk's smirk dissolved, replaced by a pallor that drained the color from her face. She stumbled back a step. No, that's not possible. Gregory's mouth opened, then closed. For once, no script came to his rescue. His confidence, once loud, now stood hollow in the glow of chandeliers. Guests erupted in whispers. Phones zoomed in. A businessman near the lounge muttered, "Oh my God, we just watched them humiliate their own boss." A woman added, "This is going viral tonight." Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't shout. His voice dropped lower, steadier. I walked in here as a guest. You treated me as less than human. But remember this, I don't just belong in this lobby. I own it. And now, the world knows how you chose to act when you thought I didn't. The chandelier still glittered, but the light felt different now. Not cold, not indifferent. It illuminated truth, sharp and unyielding. And with that, the balance shifted. Authority, once perched behind the front desk, had fallen into the hands of the man they tried to erase. The words still hung in the air. I own it. That would. For a moment, no one moved. The chandelier sparkled. The sirens flickered outside. But inside the lobby, it was as if time had paused, forcing everyone to stare at their own reflection in his truth. The blonde clerk was the first to crack. Her arms, once folded in smug confidence, dropped to her sides. Her smirk evaporated. Her lips moved, searching for words, but none came. A trembling hand brushed against the counter as if it could hold her steady. Gregory staggered half a step back. His tie, perfectly knotted minutes ago, now felt like a noose. He looked at the cameras, at the guests, at the guards, and finally back at Marcus. The weight of every arrogant word he'd spoken clamped around his throat. The guards froze. Training told them to act, but instinct told them they already had. They'd laid hands on the very man who signed their paychecks. Their eyes flicked to one another, silently pleading for a way out that didn't exist. Through the glass doors, 2 police officers entered. Their radios crackled, batons at their belts, but they stopped short, reading the room. Phones pointed not at Marcus, but at Gregory and the clerk. Guests whispered in sharp tones, "He's the owner. They humiliated him." The older officer's brow furrowed. "What exactly's going on here?" he asked cautiously. Gregory opened his mouth, but his voice betrayed him, thin, stammering. This man was... He trailed off, unable to finish the lie. Cameras caught his hesitation, the sweat gleaming on his temple. The younger officer glanced at Marcus. "Sir?" Marcus didn't raise his voice. "You've been called to arrest the owner of this property." The lobby erupted in murmurs. Phones tilted closer. Someone near the lounge clapped once, sharply, as though to punctuate the absurdity. Within seconds, more applause followed, hesitant at first, then swelling. Guests were no longer passive observers. They were participants in the undoing of arrogance. The blonde clerk shook her head, whispering to herself, "This can't be happening." The concierge, no longer silent, stepped forward. Her voice steadied with each syllable. "It's happening. I saw his name this morning. You ignored it. You ignored me." Guests cheered her courage. The man in the hoodie whispered into his phone's mic, "She's the first one from staff to back him up. This is historic." 2. Gregory's face drained of color. He tugged at his tie, but the room was suffocating him now. His authority, once inflated by arrogance, deflated in front of an audience that wouldn't forget. The police officers exchanged looks, then lowered their hands from their belts. They weren't about to arrest the man every witness and every recording had just confirmed as owner. Instead, they turned their wary eyes on Gregory. The applause swelled. Guests clapped louder, some cheering, others chanting Marcus's name. Phones shook as their holders captured every angle of his quiet victory. And in that storm of collapsing pride, Marcus stood still, the eye of the hurricane, unshaken. The applause ebbed into silence, a silence sharper than any noise. All eyes fixed on Marcus. The guards waited. The officers held their breath, and Gregory stood paralyzed. A man realizing his authority was nothing more than borrowed air. Marcus reached into his coat once more, drawing out his phone. One tap. A voice answered instantly, crisp and deliberate. "Mr. Wright, audit complete. Do you want to proceed with removals?" Gasps rippled through the lobby. Guests leaned in closer. The blonde clerk's knees seemed to buckle. Marcus's eyes locked on Gregory first. Calm, cold, inevitable. Terminate Gregory Vance. Effective immediately. Remove all system access. Security clearance revoked. Gregory jolted. "Wait!" His voice cracked, desperate, but a sharp electronic buzz cut him off. The phone behind the desk flashed red. His keycard, clipped neatly to his belt, blinked once before going dark. Locked out. Live. Phones recorded every second. The crowd exhaled, astonished. Marcus turned his gaze to the blonde clerk. She froze, shaking her head. "Please, I didn't—" His tone didn't shift. "Lauren Hayes. Terminate. Access revoked. Immediate removal." The clerk staggered back as her screen flickered, her login collapsing into error messages. She gasped, clutching the useless badge on her blazer. The cameras caught everything, arrogance dissolving into panic in real time. Finally, Marcus's eyes fell on the guards. His voice was precise, unrelenting. "Security staff are to escort terminated employees out of the premises. Do it now." The guards hesitated, then obeyed. Not because Gregory told them, not because of protocol, because Marcus owned the very ground they stood on. Guests cheered. Applause thundered, louder than before. Phones trembled as they captured the reversal. Humiliation flipped into justice. Gregory tried one last plea, his voice cracking under the weight of eyes and lenses. "You can't just erase us like this." Marcus slipped his phone back into his pocket, gaze steady. "You erased yourselves. I just signed the paperwork." The police officers didn't intervene. They didn't need to. They stood witness as staff badges buzzed red and former employees were escorted past the very guests they had mocked minutes earlier. The young concierge stood frozen behind the counter, tears threatening but unshed. Marcus turned slightly, his expression softer. "You, stay. You spoke the truth." She nodded quickly, overwhelmed. The crowd clapped again, this time for her. And in that glittering lobby, beneath the chandelier that had seen arrogance rise and collapse, justice was not loud, not violent. It was quiet, decisive, irreversible. The marble lobby had transformed. Minutes ago, it was a stage for humiliation. Now it was a courtroom, and the verdict had been delivered. Gregory, Lauren, and the others shuffled toward the exit, badges dead, futures dissolving under the weight of every recording phone. The guards escorted them silently, not as colleagues, but as liabilities. Guests parted to let them pass, some clapping, some shaking their heads, some filming every final step. The police officers lingered near the door, exchanging glances. They had come expecting a trespasser. Instead, they stood witness to a collapse, arrogance undone by truth. Neither reached for their radios. Neither had anything left to enforce. Marcus remained where it began, in the center of the lobby, still, anchored. A presence larger than uniforms, louder than sirens. He adjusted his cuff, looked up at the chandelier, then back at the crowd. Phones lifted higher. The red lights blinked like constellations, waiting for the closing line. Marcus's voice was steady, deliberate, every word chosen like a blade. "You called me a fraud in a hotel I own. You tried to erase me in front of strangers as if silence meant submission. But silence isn't weakness. Silence is power. And tonight, it ended yours." A hush fell, followed by applause. Not the nervous clapping of before, but a roar. Guests standing, some whistling, some chanting his name. The sound filled the marble hall, shaking the air like a verdict written in thunder. Marcus let it ride for a moment, then lifted a hand. The applause softened. His gaze swept the room. "I don't need to record proof. I am the proof. I don't need to beg for dignity. I live it." And for anyone watching, never mistake calm for powerless. Never mistake patience for surrender. The words sank deep, into cameras, into hearts, into history. The concierge wiped her eyes discreetly, standing taller now. Guests nodded, some whispering to their children. "Remember this." Marcus stepped forward, past the counter, past the shattered arrogance left behind. As the revolving doors opened for him, The flashing lights outside seemed less like sirens and more like spotlights. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Justice had already been carved into the marble. And as the doors closed, the lobby belonged to him again, not because of ownership on paper, but because dignity had spoken, and everyone had listened.